They are buried under the sand, like time capsules from another age. For thousands of years, the dry desert heat has protected them. The tombs of Egypt's forgotten aristocracy. Now, they are about to be remembered. Three men are rolling back the sands to find new chapters of Egyptian history. Three men uncovering the stories of nobles who served their kings from the time of Egypt's greatness to her final days.
More mummies you have, more stories about ancient Egypt you have.
We have the feeling that there was a big affection, yes, maybe more between the king and the witness.
I feel that if I look deeply at the ground of Egypt here, I can imagine that there is many tombs full of gold, not excavated yet.
It was the world's first great civilization, springing to life on the banks of the Nile. Egypt, in all its monumental glory. Glimpses of those ancient times still abound today. Sometimes large, built to be seen, but more often smaller and hidden away. And all of it might have vanished without a trace if the Egyptians hadn't been obsessed with death and preserving what was once alive. To the Egyptians, the afterlife was as real as this life. A soul on its journey needed food, shelter, companionship. So the Egyptians filled their tombs with gifts and with decorations that reflected the soul's earthly journey. Those tombs still have a story to tell, if they can be found. South of the Delta, near the banks of the Nile, is a place called Saqqara. Here, nearly 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians built their first pyramid to house the body of a pharaoh, in the shape of a stairway to heaven. In the centuries that followed, Egyptians by the thousands were entombed at Saqqara. And one of the prime locations was a cliffside with a commanding view of the Nile Valley. During the New Kingdom, when the Egyptian Empire was at its height, people with connections to the pharaoh wanted to be buried here. And they were. Today, those men and women are being disinterred. French archaeologist Alain Zévy has been overseeing the excavations for the past 2 decades.
If somebody could tell me years and years ago that I should spend so many months and years here altogether, I couldn't believe it. Sometimes you just wonder what you are doing there, playing with sand or doing things like this when you are not really a kid. But I realized suddenly that I was doing exactly what I dreamed.
But Zevi's dream started out more like a nightmare. The first rooms he uncovered were filled with cat mummies, thousands of them, remnants of the animal cults that flourished during the last Egyptian dynasties, when cats were raised and sacrificed by the millions. But Zevi's team also found more than cats. They found a shaft leading down, filled with things from the past. They kept digging through one level and another and another. Then, at a depth of about 70 feet, they found something. Scattered in the rubble were signs that after years of digging, they had reached the burial chamber. Among the items, a canopic jar used to hold entrails and vital organs, and its lid. The jar was made out of alabaster, but a lot of what they found afterwards was made out of gold. All of these treasures, and many more, were buried with the mummy of a high-ranking official who served during the reign of the pharaoh Akhenaten. Zevi had found his first New Kingdom nobleman. It was time to go looking for more. Zevi's team went to work behind the cliff face. It took years to excavate the labyrinth of corridors, shafts, and rooms that had been hollowed out of the limestone during the New Kingdom. Along the way, Zevi's team has found other tombs belonging to Egypt's rich and famous. And they've just uncovered another one. Every room has something to tell us, but it's not always written down. This time, it is.
There was sand, and I had a small lamp with me, and I saw the lady.
The lady. Images of her adorn the walls of her chapel, where friends and relatives came to honor her. Her body would have been buried deeper in the tomb. When conservators uncover more of the walls, more pictures of the lady come to light. Everything suggests she was a woman with influence.
Very quickly, I understood that this tomb belongs to only a woman. This is very exceptional because this tomb is huge. So she certainly had a kind of royal favor. Moreover, she has a lot of titles showing that she was much appreciated. I was looking for a name, and I found it here. The wet nurse who fed the flesh of the god.
Zevi translated her name as Maya, and he quickly learned the reason for her lofty status. In one image, Maya faced an effeminate young man wearing a pharaoh's headdress. This was the god Maya had nursed. His name was Tutankhamun, but we know him today as King Tut. King Tut has been a household name ever since British archaeologist Howard Carter made the find of the century in the Valley of the Kings. On November 26, 1922, Carter thrust a candle through a door that had been sealed for 3,000 years and got the thrill of a lifetime. He had found the burial chamber of a New Kingdom pharaoh who died before his 20th birthday. But unlike most royal tombs discovered in the past, this one hadn't been plundered. In room after room, a display of treasures beyond the imagination awaited his gaze. Tutankhamun was buried in 3 gold coffins. Inside was a solid gold mask. A golden statue of the young king stood nearby. A gilded throne showed King Tut side by side with his child bride, possibly his half-sister. Carter's discovery of Tut's tomb and all its treasures told us a great deal about the boy king's death, but there has always been a mystery surrounding his birth. He was probably the son of Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who worshipped only the sun instead of the traditional pantheon of gods. Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti had 6 daughters. Some of them seen here crawling on their parents, a domestic snapshot from the past. But the young Tut is never shown in the family portraits. That means his mother was probably a secondary wife who died in childbirth. The infant pharaoh would have needed a wet nurse, and apparently he got one. The Lady Maya, who was almost certainly a member of the pharaoh's inner circle.
A royal wet nurse in the 18th dynasty is not just a nanny, but is a woman of the court, because giving the milk, feeding, as it's written, feeding the flesh of the god, the king, of course not anybody can do this. What is fantastic is the feeling of love you feel between these 2 people, and especially the woman towards the king. We have the feeling that there was a big affection, yes, maybe more between the king and the wet nurse.
And, judging by the elaborate tomb that was built for her, the boy king returned that affection. While more Egyptian noblemen were buried near the Nile than anywhere else, the people who served the pharaoh on the fringes of the empire also required tombs, even if they were stationed in the middle of the desert. Dr. Zahi Hawass is Egypt's head of antiquities, the man in charge of all things ancient. He's on his way to the oasis of Bahariya, a 5-hour drive from Cairo. For thousands of years, the oasis has been an island of greenery in a sea of sand, and it's not much different today, except for the modern village that's replaced the ancient settlement. About 700 years after King Tut, when the Egyptian empire had begun its gradual decline, this was a prosperous agricultural center, so there was plenty of money to spend on lavish tombs. Local townspeople are well aware that they're sitting on top of a potential bonanza of old artifacts, and they've come up with a novel way of getting at them.
When you come to a village like this, you can hear rumors. If there is a tomb, means the treasure is gold. This talk comes from one to the other one. It becomes big in the town. And that's why they wanted to build their houses above the treasures of the pharaohs.
A house built directly above a tomb allowed the enterprising homeowner the chance to dig around in his own basement anytime he needed something to sell on a black market hungry for antiquities. That practice has continued to the present day, and Zahi Hawass wants it to stop. So he's made a controversial decision by ordering some of the houses torn down.
It was a decision that they made that we have to protect this site. We have in the same time to demolish any house for the safety of the monuments. And that's really what people should know. The safety, the monuments, and the protection of the monuments are the most important thing. We can go and come, but this antiquities, it will never be repeated.
The excavations under the modern village continue to turn up artifacts from a later period in Egyptian history, when Greece was emerging as a major power. This restored tomb dates from about 600 BC, during the 26th dynasty. Egypt was no longer a superpower in the region. The influence of the pharaoh had diminished, and the power of local officials had increased, especially in prosperous outposts like Bahariya.
Those people, they were able to make these beautiful tombs because they were wealthy. If you look at the size of the tomb and look also at the scenes, you will find it's equal to any tomb that is located in the Valley of the Kings.
One source of Bahariya's wealth was a wine made from dates, coveted throughout the Mediterranean world. There was money to be made picking the dates and processing them, and even more money to be made getting the wine to markets in the Northeast.
Every month, at least, will be a big route of all these donkeys going from here, maybe through the 200 miles from Bahariya to Middle Egypt. It's a difficult journey, but you have to think the end of the journey will bring wealth.
One of the people who prospered was the governor of Bahariya, another nobleman who had served a pharaoh. His tomb was discovered in 1999. The inscriptions on the tomb's walls provided new insights about the role of a provincial administrator as the empire was slowly coming to an end. This one apparently saw himself as almost an equal to the pharaoh.
It is saying that he is a priest of Isis and the priest of Osiris, and his name is written in hieroglyphic Jet Khinsu Yuf-Ankh, and he's in front of the great god. And he's shown here that he will be a king in the afterlife because Osiris is holding the tools of the ruler here.
And we can imagine Jet Khinsu Yuf-Ankh entering inside the temple with his priestly clothes. He's coming to meet the god alone. He's entering in this dark, bringing with him incense and giving it offering to the god. And at the same time, the offering table will be full of figs and dates because he would like the god to be happy, because Jet Khinsu Yuf-Ankh is the link between the people and the god.
Now Zahi Hawass is looking for the tomb of the governor's wife. But he's in for a shock of the electrical kind.
What's that?
Okay.
God.
I thought you had a scorpion or a cobra.
Oh, I did too.
Are you okay?
Shock. Electricity is terrible. Ooh.
Oh, wait, I need to see your face a little bit more. So you can lie now.
All the fill has to be removed by hand, a basketful at a time. Inside the tomb, Dr. Hawass makes a discovery that concerns him.
It seems that we have a big problem here, which I did not really figure before, and that is this existence of this hole that I believe that maybe in the Roman period the robbers entered from this hall and they did steal most of the artifacts, then maybe we're not really going to find anything in this room, and this will be too bad because even we'll not know the function of the room, because we need to find some artifacts to find out what's this really room used for.
But thieves didn't always take everything when they ransacked a tomb, especially if it had no apparent value.
في حاجة طلعت alabaster.
Zahi Hawass does a little digging of his own and eventually is rewarded.
This is nice. Oh, it's canopic jar.
It's the lid of a small canopic jar, the kind of container usually buried with the mummy. To a thief, it meant nothing. To Dr. Hawass, it means that they might be close to finding the governor's wife. At Saqqara, Alain Zevi is still searching for his missing lady. But Maya's burial chamber is nowhere to be found. And he keeps running into cats. Most of the cats were buried here very late in Egypt's history, around the time Cleopatra was queen and Julius Caesar governed in Rome. The great empire of the New Kingdom pharaohs was a distant memory by now. Living under foreign rule, Egyptians increasingly found solace in cults that required animal sacrifices. One of the most popular of these cults was dedicated to Bastet, the cat goddess. As more and more cat mummies are uncovered, Zevi decides the time has come to take a closer look at them from the inside out. That task falls to experts from another field, radiologists Martine and Roger Lichtenberg. The first thing the X-rays reveal is how the cats were killed.
This one has very nice skull, and the skull is not destroyed. He didn't die being hit on the head. He died with the neck being twisted, see?
The cat cult of Bastet was at its height in Egypt in the years following the conquest by Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC. As people sought to gain the god's favor, the priests of Bastet ran a lively business raising cats and turning them into offerings.
So probably it's a big cat. But the biggest cats, they dare not twist the neck, you know, they rather make a blow on the head. This was a very nice cat. Look at that, very nice head. Look at the big teeth and so on. It's a huge cat.
After a cat was killed, it underwent the traditional Egyptian ritual of mummification. The priests embalmed its body and wrapped it in linen. Finally, the mummy was placed in one of the recycled tombs. Naturally, all of the work the priests performed was done for a fee, and customers generally got what they paid for.
According to how much you want to pay, you get a small mummy or a big mummy. If you're very rich, and if you want to please God very much, goddess very much, you buy even a pile of cats, you know, many cats together.
But the X-rays suggest that the priests sometimes cut a few corners.
Look, this is a mummy too, okay, a small mummy, but it's not a complete mummy. They put only one bone inside, or it's not a complete body, is it? A complete body?
It's a jumble of bones.
It's a jumble of bones, okay?
It's a
Just a
bad
jumble
mummy.
of bones. And a quarter of the mummies were just fake mummies. They have nothing in the wrappings.
But whether the priests were running a con game or there was simply a scarcity of cats, no one really knows. While the cat mummies are being examined, another member of Xavier's team, Patrick Deleuze, is conducting a comprehensive survey of the site.
We cannot see this site just from outside. We must imagine, see how it is from inside. And now we have just a first glimpse.
Every chamber is measured precisely, and its location inside the tomb complex is pinpointed.
C'est bon là? Oui, je suis bon. Bouge plus.
We have galleries, we have shafts, we have chapels, we have sometimes tombs with several levels. It's a very, very complex set of tombs and of underground monuments which is hidden behind there. And this is very difficult to imagine from outside.
From the measurements, it's possible to recreate what the tomb for King Tut's wet nurse would have looked like when it was built. Its most obvious features are its size and its complexity. While the search for Maya's burial chamber goes on, Xavier's team has found the entrance to another tomb a few dozen feet away. Workmen begin to clear away loose sand and stones, starting an excavation that will take most of a season. Until then, there's nothing to do but wait. "200 miles to the west in Bahariya, the search for the wife of the governor has hit pay dirt. In the same chamber where he was nearly electrocuted, Zahi Hawass's workers have found another sarcophagus under the rubble. As he had hoped, it belongs to the governor's wife, a woman named Nasa. At first glance, his fears that the tomb had been looted sometime in the past seem to be confirmed. But when her remains are examined in detail, another story emerges. Over 100 artifacts are discovered, and most of them are made of gold.
This is some of the treasures that we found, which is really beautiful. Like this one, you can see this is that they put it on the nails like this. Nasa was really beautiful. She tried to be covering her body with gold, then she can live happily in the afterlife. And that's why we found many beautiful pieces of this, and some of them even in the shape of looks like a scallop to me. But the interesting one also is this one. You know, they open in the side apart, then they take everything inside the body from this place. This is where they cover the mummification part with piece of gold like this. Beautiful, wonderful. And this one, it's heavy. They put it under the tongue. And this is really my favorite piece, which really I love. Look at this. She is putting the name of the king in her heart, because this is the protector of Egypt.
The fact that so many things of value escaped the attention of the looters is a stroke of luck, but not really a surprise.
A thief always is in a hurry. A thief is a thief. Then the thief cannot sit down and relax and steal things. He knows that the police are behind him, the police of the cemetery, the police of the town. If he was caught, he will be, maybe they cut his nose and they throw him away into Sinai. That was the punishment of any thief. This is why they came here in the Roman period. They entered inside quickly. They took the gold and they ran away. That was happened exactly. Then they left to us the 103 pieces of gold for us to discover.
Outside the sarcophagus, workers also found over 200 figurines called Schwabti.
And this really is very important because it tells us about the name of the people who are buried here, and also tells us about the funerary belief of the ancient Egyptian. They feed you, they clean after you, they help you to be living safely there in the afterlife. And before that, they also help you to answer all the questions.
For the Egyptians, having a Schwabti around in the afterlife was almost like having a defense lawyer.
The gods will say, "Did you see anything wrong?" And the Schwabti will say, "No, of course."
At Saqqara, Zevi's workmen have uncovered something remarkable beneath the sand. A rectangular structure built thousands of years ago, directly in front of the cliff.
It is a chapel partly built and partly hewn in the rock. And the big surprise was to find the condition of this wall, which is really wonderful with the colors and with everything. So I opened the curtain. It's not a show, it's bigger. The curtain is here, not for the show, but to protect against the dust of visitors, everything. But of course, it makes the things more spectacular. And you can see now. Sorry, a lot of silk. A big part of the chapel is here. It's absolutely wonderful.
Whoever this chapel was built for, it was someone important. The room was big, even by Egyptian standards, and no expense had been spared on decoration. On every wall, paintings, carvings, and inscriptions confirm that the tomb belonged to a wealthy nobleman from the New Kingdom. There was a feast to satisfy his hunger in the afterlife. Servants to carry out his every wish. Zevi's first order of business was to find the name of the man the tomb was built for.
Always this kind of obsession. You enter a tomb, where is the name? The name is here, 2 falcons on a standard, and these signs. It is oui, mes. This is how to read this. There are several interpretations. I chose Necher oui mes, the man who is born from the 2 gods. The 2 gods are Horus and Set.
Zevi is unfamiliar with the name Necherwemus, who he was or what service he provided for the pharaoh.
You can see the name of the man, Necherwemus, here and here.
Other inscriptions on a collapsed column nearby suggest that Necherwemus was a man of culture, that he was influential and literate.
A lot of epithets. I mean, a man of wisdom, a man who knows how to speak, how to write. We have the feeling that he was really a man proud of his culture.
Nechowemus had a skill few in his society possessed. He could write, and that alone would have assured him a high-ranking job.
To read and to write, the capacity of writing is the source of power in many societies. An official in Egypt is somebody who can write.
But Zavi feels certain Nechowemus must have been more than a mere scribe to have merited such an opulent tomb. He had obviously served the pharaoh, and served him well. But in what capacity? While Zavi is left to ponder this question, the excavation work continues at the far end of the chamber.
I think it's good.
Engineer Pierre Veillat has to distinguish between stone that might be original and rocks that were added later as fill.
Not so strong.
Everyone is conscious that countless tons of limestone are massed above them.
I think the danger is about those stones which can fall down, and each stone, the weight of each stone is about 20 pounds, something like that. You know, if you are back, if you are down, and you take a stone on the head, it's not so good for you, I think.
It's slow going. Every rock has to be carried out by hand. But eventually, they break through and find something. It's a carving of the pharaoh Nechowemus had served, a small statue of a king who looms large in Egyptian history. He was known as Ramses the Great. Ramses was a king among pharaohs who ruled Egypt for over 60 years, fathered nearly 100 children, and oversaw the greatest building spree in his empire's history at places like Luxor and Abu Simbel. Ramses was also a tireless master of self-promotion, who made sure that posterity would know his image, his legacy, and his name. The fact that Nechowemus had worked for the greatest of all pharaohs was a vital piece of information, and more discoveries would follow in time. On the outskirts of the Bahariya oasis lies a Greco-Roman cemetery discovered in 1996 by Zahi Hawass and his team. Dr. Hawass has returned to see how the excavations are coming along. He's chosen Egyptian archaeologist Tariq El-Awadi to oversee the work. The cemetery covers some 14 square miles, all of it hidden by tons of sand.
In any place here that you will dig, you'll find a tomb. It's clear. If you look at the ground everywhere, you will find evidence of small mounds. If you have a mound that has some kind of artifacts like pottery, means there is something underneath. And therefore, if you look at this area, you just take your hand and the sand, you'll find an entrance of a tomb. Then you start the excavations, but the most important, when you excavate, you have to be careful because underneath there are mummies.
The cemetery was discovered by accident when a donkey stepped in a hole and revealed a tomb underneath. Inside the tomb were mummies, lots of them. Most of them were gilded and in remarkably good condition. Dr. Hawass authorized a more extensive search, and the golden mummies kept turning up. In the course of his work at the cemetery, Tariq has become a connoisseur of sand in all its subtle variations.
The sand hides mummies, and we have to fight the sand to find mummies. We can know from the sand, from the touch of the sand, if there is mummies under the sand or not. Because the mummy change the nature of the sand. If the sand little bit cold and dark, we know that there is a mummy under the sand. But if it is dry, soft, and hot, it means there is nothing under the sand. I like to wait until the sand tells me what is underneath.
Tariq has made a number of new discoveries, and Zahi Hawass is anxious to have a look. This tomb has obviously been entered in the past by thieves who did more than just steal things.
Some people entered inside and they tried to break all the heads of all the mummies. It's very strange. You can see all the mummies here are without heads. Look at this child mummy. It's without head. Behind me, look. The head was cut off. And that's also, the head was cut off. Then it seems that someone, maybe in ancient times or modern times, were looking for something inside the mummies.
A few of the mummies they come across remain intact, but most have been ripped apart without any regard for what the Egyptians regarded as sacred.
The Egyptians did come here. They cut this room in the rock. They mummified their bodies. They spent money on it. They thought that they will put his body and rest in a place like this to go to afterlife. And now someone will come and damage all of this. Broken bones, broken heads, broken mummies, then that's something that personally disturbed me and make me very upset.
Yet even the destruction tells us something. Tariq believes it's possible that some of the headless mummies are the result of an ancient family feud, where even the bodies of children were decapitated in an act of revenge over some forgotten dispute. At Saqqara, the rocks continue to stream out of the tomb, and Zavi's team has made a new discovery. Just behind the small carving of Ramses, and attached to it, they find another statue. Towering above the tiny pharaoh is the life-size head of a cow, the goddess Hathor, and Zavi couldn't be more delighted.
He asked me if the eyes of the cow are green or blue. I say they are just like your eyes, beautiful. Angry now.
In one of her many guises, Hathor was a protector of the dead, who was there to guarantee Nechowemus a safe passage through the afterlife. Her presence in the tomb confirms Zavi's belief that the mysterious Nechowemus had played a major political role during the great pharaoh's reign. He had been rewarded with a sumptuous burial, presided over by Hathor and Ramses. But Zavi still didn't know what Nechowemus had done to deserve it.
I would like to find more inscriptions. I want to know exactly who was Natural Mess. Till now, we know he was somebody who could afford this kind of thing, but we don't know more.
In the search for more clues about Nechowemus's identity, Xavier travels to the ancient Egyptian capital of Thebes. Today, it's called Luxor, and it's filled with monuments built by Ramses to celebrate himself. So it's possible Nechowemus is mentioned somewhere. The walls still echo with Ramses' accomplishments, especially his military victories.
It was always battles, of wars, of fights. It's history, it's normal history of mankind.
Every war requires an enemy, and when Ramses became pharaoh, Egypt's greatest adversary was the Hittite Empire to the north. The young Ramses decided to confront the Hittites on their own turf. He led an army of about 20,000 men north and met the enemy outside the city of Kadesh. It is one of the first battles in history for which detailed accounts survive. Hittite spies led the Egyptians into an ambush. Ramses and a few hundred of his men were separated from the rest of the army and pinned down near the Orontes River. It was a desperate position until a reserve division of Egyptian foot soldiers launched a counterattack, driving the enemy into the river and rescuing their pharaoh. Ramses returned to Egypt and immediately claimed a great victory. The walls of the temples at Luxor are still emblazoned with accounts of the pharaoh's heroic exploits on that day. There's also a copy of the peace treaty that finally ended the conflict 16 years later. And it is this document that Xavier hopes will shed some light on Nechowemus's identity.
The Egyptians and the Hittites certainly realized that war was not the solution. It was just a dead end, and for several reasons, we can guess, but we don't know all of them. The conclusion was to try to make a treaty, but a treaty between two powers of the same level, more or less.
The negotiations were long and complex, but they ended with a deal and a peace treaty that spelled out the terms. 3 Egyptian envoys joined 3 Hittite diplomats to carry a copy of the treaty to the Egyptian capital. It promised that friendship would replace hostility. Each side vowed never to strike the other first. In the event of an attack from a third party, they would form a common defense. There would be an exchange of prisoners and an extradition pact. The treaty was carved in cuneiform on a silver tablet and presented to the pharaoh. Ramses in turn had it carved on the walls of the temples at Thebes. Xavier is here to see if he can find the name of the man who led Egypt's negotiating team and brought the treaty back to Ramses. And he finds what he's looking for.
I can see the words royal envoys, and after that we have maybe the head of a falcon, and it could be a part of the name of Nechowemus. We can compare with Ramesside inscriptions. It's like the Bible for the text of this period. So here we have the peace treaty, and this could be the name of Nechowemus. This kind of confirmation is as important for a scholar, for Egyptologist, as the discovery of a tomb.
Two falcons above a standard. Nechowemus, the man who made peace between two great empires and was amply rewarded in the afterlife.
It's an historical figure who is coming to light, and this is fantastic for me. It's maybe as important as the cow of Hathor, the statue. It's not only an exceptional masterpiece, it's not only a beautiful tomb, but it is history.
With the identity of the tomb's owner finally solved, the work of freeing Hathor from her stone prison goes on.
Ça va être très joli, on va voir le...
Anne Liege injects an adhesive into the stone to preserve the thin layers of 3,000-year-old paint. And then, one day, it is done. Hathor has been restored.
This is the sweetest cow I ever met, and I shall ever meet, I'm sure. The goddess Hathor in shape of a cow with beautiful eyes, a little bit sad. For me, it's, this mixture of wilderness and of sweetness is something extraordinary. And here, even if she's only a cow, if I can say, there is something very human.
For Alain Zévy, this season's work is over. Another New Kingdom tomb has been found and returned to its former splendor. Another of the king's men has been identified, thanks to the gifts he took to the afterlife. The outlines of another tomb can be added to the map of the mortuary complex. And next year, it will be time to remove yet another layer of sand. To the west in Bahariya, Tariq has found another tomb. Zahi Hawass is there to inspect it.
I see the most beautiful mummy I've ever seen. The mask make the mummy it's completely realistic. Seems to be a mummy of a lady because the eyes are looking at us as if she's alive.
I'm a lucky man because I found this tomb. This is something incredible.
Each of these mummies was interred very late in Egypt's history, about 1,500 years after the glory days of Ramses. The civilization that had lasted for 3,000 years had almost run its course. But even though the culture that had bound the land and the people together was fading, the Egyptian obsession with death and the afterlife remained as strong as it had ever been. What had once been the prerogative of kings and then the king's men had over time been adopted by the upper and middle classes. Now, anyone with money could pay to have a tomb built and afford a stylish burial. And most of the tombs they were buried in still lie under the sand, each with a story to tell, patiently waiting through eternity until they are found.